The Wizards Hasbro Fireside Chat has just finished. We're going to talk about some of the highlights, my key takeaways, and opinions on what was said. Let's just kick it off with player segmentation. So they talked about how in the past, they mostly focused on the competitive player, but a few years back, they started focusing on figuring out like what are our different player segments? What are the different types of player, the different types of fan out there? And that's when they started experimenting and they started coming up with different products to fit those different segments. Their player segmentation is broken down into 3 categories. They've got competitive, social, and the collector. I have to be honest, like, it did help me understand a little bit better, like, why we have so many SKUs and products out there. I'm not saying they've executed everything perfectly, but it is helping me understand their strategy for sticking around, right? Which at the end of the day, not every product is for everybody. They're trying to make some products for each segment of their player base and or their fan base, really. And that also explains a little bit why they have a lot of releases and more products out there now, which also may play into why we feel like there are too many. Now, personally, I think there's another category there for the seller. I don't know if you want to call it the seller, flipper, investor. There's another segment there. The reason it's important is a lot of the sales come from that 4th segment that I believe exists that they're either A, missing, or B, not wanting to talk about. If you took all their sales, right, and they said, hey, we could break it down into a certain percentage come from the competitive player, a certain percentage come from the social, the casual player, and a certain percentage come from the collector. And there's people that are hybrids of the 3, and you'd have to work that out in the percentages. What they're missing is that 4th segment, right? So a certain percentage of the sales, in my opinion, are coming from the people who really only want to buy it just to resell it. They're not actually competitive, social, or collector. And that's fine. Engage with the game how you will. But those sales overinflate, and again, this is my opinion, those sales overinflate the print to demand numbers. It was brought up because there was a claim of Magic printing too many cards, and I'm glad that was actually brought up in the call, but they're saying the response is basically that, no, we're not printing too many cards. There's no evidence of that, and that's a misunderstanding of their business and their customers. My problem with that answer is that I think Wizards has a misunderstanding there, that there's that 4th segment that they don't mention, that are buying up things, driving up that print to demand number, when in reality, everything purchased by that, I'm a seller only, I don't collect, play, or I'm not competitive. That means that print to demand number is larger than the true 3-pillared customer segment can consume. So your competitor, casual, and collector are going to buy a certain amount of product, okay? But if that 4th segment is buying product also, and the other 3 are buying product, then at the end, when the dust settles and there's no more printing, there's going to be an overage in the supply because all 3 had bought what they wanted during the print to demand time frame. Then the 4th segment also bought some, and yeah, there's going to be some from the first 3 segments that discover it and they didn't make it in time, right, before the printing ended, and so they buy from those resellers. That's true, but I don't know if there's actually enough people from those first 3 segments to buy from the resellers to suck up all the supply, leaving just a little bit of demand left, which is maybe what we want if we want to keep values strong in the secondary market. We may never actually truly know because we don't have access to the systems required to gather all that kind of data. Even if I'm wrong about how that segment plays into the numbers, and let's just say I'm wrong about the print to demand and the whole scenario I just mentioned, let's say I'm wrong, there's still a 4th segment that they are not talking about, which is somebody who's buying product that is not a collector, not a social player, and not a competitive player. They do talk about hybrid digital and in-person players and how those are the most engaged and they spend the most. That's interesting. I consider myself one of those players. I love playing on Arena. I can get on a game without any planning or scheduling or figuring out, what venue do we go, meeting up with people in real life. It's easy to play a game. So I do that. But I also love my collecting, and I do like playing in person. So I'm one of those hybrid players. It seems like they're going to be focusing on that hybrid player more going forward, because those are the players that are the most engaged and spending the most. They talked about one of the ways of doing that is that Arena is going to be refactored. I'm not 100% sure what that means. Are they talking the code? Like, are they talking we're going to see a new interface in Arena? Are they talking back-end process being refactored? Are they talking just the marketing of it? Personally, I didn't take a whole lot away from that other than something will change in Arena, and they're going to put some attention toward that digital hybrid player. They did mention that going forward, sets won't be released as closely together as they have been recently. They talked about supply chain issues, recently compressed too many sets to being released too closely together. Who actually knows if that was the case or if they just did poor planning, and who knows, right? But this is their official statement, supply chain issues. They had said that in 2023, we're going to see their tentpole sets no more than roughly 2 months in between each other with some micro sets sprinkled between. That still feels like a lot to me. If that's them pulling back, I think pulling back a little bit on the sets is good, like spreading them out a little bit more. I think that's good. So if it's a step in the direction of spreading out the sets, that's a step in the right direction. I kind of feel like it should be spread out a little bit more, but they are pressing for profit and growth. They do have a lot more focus on like different player segments now. So in their eyes, they might not be able to pull back much more if they've got, competitor, social, and collector that they have to satisfy, and they're looking at, different products and sets for each. 1 year is only 12 months. So you don't have a lot of time to make things for these different player segments. So I don't know if we're going to see it pull back much more than that, but that was their statement. They had mentioned an example of a tentpole set would be like the Lord of the Rings release coming out. They reference it as a Universes Beyond set. I don't know if you guys are aware of. So Universes Beyond seems to me like that is their IP when they blend with other IPs. So you have things like Lord of the Rings. They mentioned Doctor Who, Final Fantasy, Assassin's Creed. And then in the past, that would be things like Stranger Things. Now, I am a fan of most of these crossovers simply because if I like the IP of the crossover and I like Magic the Gathering, you put the two things together and generally it's a fun thing. It's a fun product, and that also appeals to the collector side of me. So I guess, I get it. Like, that's part of that, okay, we're going to try to satisfy the collector segment. But to me, again, it still feels like too much too fast. Like, I want to slow down and enjoy. I kind of feel like all three of the segments they mentioned might like it to slow down for the enjoyment. I remember a time when you used to get a set and you'd have a lot of months between. You could really sit down. You could build your collections. You could learn the cards, learn the new mechanics, build your decks, start playing, experimenting. Guys, we don't move that fast. Like, we want to enjoy the thing. Stop shoving product down our throat, even if it's product we love and enjoy, even if it's great combinations of different IPs. Let us savor it a little bit, right? Like, that's kind of my gut reaction. Too much of a good thing is not necessarily a good thing. Too much special stuff means nothing is special. So, like, it's just taper it out, man. Like, I understand the pressure for the increase in price and growth and everything, but if you milk too much too fast, if we go too many years from now at the same pace and we look back and you've just milked it dry, is that okay with you? That, like, can you sit back and say, we're going to milk it dry and then we'll kill Magic and we'll kill the IP, we'll switch over to Dungeons and Dragons, everything will be fine from an investor standpoint, we'll just move on? Like, is that the plan? Is that what you're thinking? I sure hope not. As a Magic player and fan of many, many years, I don't want to see Magic die. I don't want to see it go anywhere. But I don't know if that's your opinion as well, or if you're just wringing it dry until it's dead. I don't know. I think a better long-term strategy is to just stretch out a little bit more, like put a little more time between the products to let us actually enjoy the darn things. Let's move into this price elasticity. So it appears the price sensitive terminology has now changed to price elasticity, or price elastic consumers. They use the term price elastic a lot. They said the general consumers are under financial pressure. I mean, that's true. They said they had taken some pricing action recently, but they said pricing action. Like, what is pricing action? It just wasn't clear to me. Was the action lowering prices, which they didn't want to do, but they did it because they thought it was the right thing? Or was it raising prices? That was not clear to me. My takeaway was that they're saying we are a less price elastic customer than other types of customers in other gaming segments. We spend a ton of money on Magic. I don't know what they're talking, like, we spend a ton of, this is known as one of the most expensive games and hobbies to be in. I don't understand what they're even saying there, because again, this is one of the most expensive hobbies to be in. We spend, like, their products are expensive as hell already. Moving on, so they had mentioned Secret Lair is their collector product line. Yeah, that makes sense. If you're purely, playing, even competitive play, casual play, like, you don't need to do that with Secret Lair products. You can find most of those cards in other printed forms that are a lot cheaper. But again, even for a collector, like, collectors like to enjoy their collections. I think you got to slow down a little on the Secret Lairs. It was asked if Wizards keeps track of the secondary market values. Their answer, just totally, guys, their answer was a smoke and mirrors misdirection answer. They did not directly answer it, in my opinion. They focused on more primary market information by talking about how they're on their way to becoming a $1 billion IP. Guys, they asked you about secondary market values, not the primary market value of Magic being close to $1 billion. Like, that has nothing to do with it. They totally sidestepped that answer. They did at the end give, like, the sort of the standard corporate, we don't participate in the secondary market. Okay, that's not even what they asked. They didn't ask if you participate in the secondary market. They just asked if you keep track of the secondary market value. So I don't know that we got a clear or great answer there. And then with the 30th edition set, this was kind of odd. This was, like, very, very skimmed over. They said they admitted to scaling back the supply of the 30th set. And, like, that was kind of all I got out of that. But it's like, let's talk about that a little more. I don't know that that was anything that was planned or strategic. You were like 30 minutes in or whatever it was into the actual sale. The sales numbers weren't looking good, and then you just cut off the sale. That's a reactionary. That's not a proactive. That's not a plan ahead situation. You just reacted. The other problem I have that wasn't really addressed is, what about all the rest of the product you printed? Unless, are you actually cutting off the printing of that product? And I don't know if that's the case or not, but you didn't talk about it. You didn't dive into it, so I don't know. Finally, they move into D&D monetization. I've got to admit, I'm mixed with this, because D&D itself is awesome, okay? Like, at the end of the day, like, my personal feelings, I've got no problems with them doubling down on the D&D movement. They said there's a resurgence coming up right now with D&D. I get that, and it's cool, and I hope to see more D&D stuff. What I hope it doesn't do is I hope it doesn't kill Magic. Like, I hope it's not a situation where D&D just overshadows Magic to the point where they're willing to actually milk it dry, drop Magic, it could be 10 years from now, but at some point, drop Magic, go full in on D&D. And again, I like D&D. I love D&D. So it's bittersweet, because I'm okay with the D&D part growing, but I'm not okay with the Magic part dying. And again, this is just my interpretation. They didn't say that was going to happen, but I'm listening to stuff. And this is one of the things I'm hoping that it's not D&D is the future and Magic is the past. They did mention the movie coming up. I don't know if you guys knew about this. There is a Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, March 31st. I watched the trailer. It looks like it's going to be good, at least as far as I could tell through the trailer. The cast list has well-known names, so I think, You know, from an IP perspective, a cast perspective, the editing looks great. My perspective, it's probably going to be a hit. If it is, and they end up making more D&D movies, and you have this huge big series and like cinematic IP, great. I just don't want it to kill Magic. And they ended it by saying that D&D was going to be the poster child for their growth blueprint. Now, I know that's like a Wizards-centric view of it, not a Magic-specific view, but that's what this call was. It was a Wizards and Hasbro conversation, not a Magic and Hasbro conversation, although most of the conversation did address Magic because right now, today, that's their biggest pillar. Overall, my takeaways, it definitely was not a damage control situation, at least in my opinion. Or if it wasn't damage control for the consumer. It was damage control for the investor, which I think is probably what we all expected. This was not an apology-centric or mistake-admitting type of thing. I know a lot of people were saying that that's what they expected anyway, and that's pretty much, I think, what we all expected. It would have been nice to hear them apologize for some of the mistakes and call out some things and then lay out a plan for fixing them. But that's just not what happened. It's an investor call. It's a growth. It's a pricing thing. It's about profitability. And that's what you would expect looking through that corporate looking glass. Now, the full audio should be out there for about a year, they said. I'll put a link below if you guys want to listen to the entire thing. By all means, draw your own conclusions. This is just me sharing my reflections, my takeaways, and how I interpreted the call. I am very interested in what you guys are thinking. I think this is the topic of the time right now, so please leave your comments below. I'm also open-minded too, so if I'm interpreting something you feel like I'm just off the wall, off base totally, I'm open to hearing your opinions. I'm open to change, but a key ingredient for that is that we need to communicate. So one of the ways we can do that is in the comment section. You can also go to my Discord. I've got a link at tedsbasement.com if you want to chat between videos. And if you like this video and you want to see more, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. That's what helps grow the channel. And I can't thank you enough if you do. I hope you guys have a happy holidays, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.